Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this Thursday, March 9th in the Locher Room. I'm Alan Locher. My guest today is actor and musician Peter Boynton, who played the villain we all love to hate, Tonio Reyes, on CBS's As the World Turns. Peter's musical training began in the junior choir of his hometown church. He formed his first band in the sixth grade with an unusually talented group of neighborhood friends. After receiving his degree in music theory composition from the University of Amherst, he headed to the Big Apple. His acting career spanned 20 years while based in New York City with roles in national tours, regional theater, often on Broadway, TV special, daytime soaps, and films. Some of those highlights include the 1995 revival of the Broadway musical She Loves Me, his juicy tenure on As the World Turns from 1985 to 1991. Every actor also needs at least one turn in a horror film, and he had his with a featured role in HellRaiser III. From 1996 to 2019, he produced, directed, and performed in stage musicals he mounted in the 1891 dairy barn he renovated on his property in Vermont. He moved there to raise his young daughter, Noni, which brought new opportunities as an educator. Peter has produced and directed the musicals at the local high school while teaching acting and directing at Burlington College. As you all know, I grew up watching As the World Turns and Tonio Reyes. It is such a great pleasure to welcome Peter Boynton to the Locher Room. Hey, Peter.
Hey, thank you very much.
You are so welcome. Like I said, real pleasure. I know the fans are really excited to see you. I actually got an email from a fan. He said, "Hello, Mr. Boynton, and happy to see you. I grew up watching As the World Turns. Tonio Reyes and James Stenberg were my two all-time favorite characters. You were one of the most underrated actors on daytime during your era and did not get the props you deserved, in my opinion." And that's from Dante.
That's very sweet. You know, I will say we all got great recognition because we were paid very well.
There you go. That is very, very true. Talk about that musical training and being in the hometown choir church. Where was that? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up, I was born in Maine originally, and then my family moved outside of Boston, Massachusetts, to Foxborough, where the New England Patriots are based. That's what Foxborough is famous for. So I did I grew up in an Episcopal church. I'm not particularly a religious person. I'm more spiritual, but to me, church is all about music. And I had a terrific junior choir music director who insisted that we all learn music theory, at a very young age. So when I always intended, I did not think I would be an actor. That was the farthest thing in my brain. And I went and got my music theory composition degree at UMass Amherst and went right to New York thinking I'm going to be a songwriter. And I did a fair amount of that and continued with the music, but I fell in with a really cool group of people that were involved with theater. And that started with, could you write a little pre-show thing for our off Broadway gig? And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Well, come see it. Okay, I'll come see it. Okay, well, in this next one, could you just do this little thing, hold a broom and say boo or something? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. Not literally, but I don't remember what it was.
Right,
And
but that's your entree into
that kind of thing. And I did
Wow.
a high school musical, and I did a musical in college, but I'd never thought this would be a career. So then that morphed into just doing more of that. And one night a guy said, "Hey, I'd like to represent you." I said, "As what?" He said, "As an actor." I was like, okay, but I'm not an actor. And he said, "Well, you could be." And I was just one of those lucky people. My friends who studied all through college, got their degrees in theater and wanted to be actors, and were like, wait a minute, this isn't fair. But I sang well, and I was tall, and I fit a kind of type that was easy to cast in musical theater. And this is well before. Remember, I got to New York in 77. So this is way before the explosion of professional actor training programs. Back then there was Juilliard and a program out in Seattle. There were a half dozen famous, or well-known actor training programs. Now there's, hundreds of them.
Right.
So the feeder system into New York City, in a lot of ways, I'm sure it's much more competitive today, than it was in my day. So that's how that
That's,
sort of morphed into the theater
that's
thing.
incredible. Who
Go
was the
ahead.
choir leader who, got you going? Do
Oh,
you remember their name?
her name was Julie. Oh, that's a great question. Julie. I'm gonna have to ask one of my siblings. I can't
Yeah, I
remember
just
her
thought,
last name.
give her a shout out. But I mean, you really had the talent in you. I mean, to not to have acting as a thought and to think of what you know, for us watching here today, us all knowing your incredible performance as Tonio throughout your time there. Um, really, that's spectacular. You just
Yep. But if you think
had it
about it,
in you.
if you think about it, it makes sense because where I succeeded initially was in musical theater. And obviously, one of the most important parts of musical theater is the music. And I sang well, I read music, I was really fast at that part of it. So it makes sense. And I fit a type, a character type.
Yeah.
Back then, I was like the young guy, so it made sense that that would work. And of course, I'm always interested in perfecting whatever craft I'm working at. So believe me, I was not a particularly good actor when I started. I don't think, I think it's all about learning
Oh
some
well, we're
technique.
gonna get there because for you not thinking that, but you being thrown in with some of those people you were working with. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I wanted to go back to the music. Who were some of your musical influences back then,
Oh, I was,
when you were
so
younger?
I had rock bands from the same rock band from sixth grade all the way through graduating from high school. So during those years, Deep Purple, Santana,
Wow.
Michael McDonald, Hall and Oates. I mean, kind of a range, but definitely, really was not like a Beatles, and I don't know. I was more into a harder rock kind of. Deep Purple was one of my favorite. A lot of Jethro Tull. I know that sounds a little weird, but remember, I was outside of Boston, so we could go into the old Boston Garden, which was an amazing building, and see, top line. During high school, I was going in and I think I saw Jethro Tull 3 times, from Passion and Thick as a Brick, all those different albums, their story albums that they released. But that once I got into college, I started to get more exposed to jazz and a little bit of musical theater, the American standards, the American Songbook of Gershwin, Cole Porter, Kern, Rodgers and Hart, that sort of thing. So now I think, now that I'm back now a year and a half at songwriting and having some success getting my songs into synchronization libraries, those are the people that pitch your music for TV and film. So now mostly my writing is definitely more in a pop vein with a slight jazz influence.
Uh, the synchronization organization, is it? Are you writing lyrics and music,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, sometimes I collaborate. Sometimes I what they call top line, which means I have a friend, Chicago Bob, who's in Chicago, and his name is Bob, obviously. But Bob is a wonderful composer, and he basically writes piano on piano, but he doesn't write lyrics. He doesn't write melody. So if he has a song he really likes that he's written, and it isn't necessarily in song form, meaning today it's verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, and then maybe back to chorus, that sort of thing. Um, he'll send me the song, and if I like it, I'll put it into the structure of a contemporary pop song, and then I'll add the melody and lyrics. So that's top lining. So I do some of that, and I do a lot of just from scratch. I write the whole thing, So
if fans wanted to hear some of the music that you have
peterboynton.com. just
to
go to
hear? Yeah, I just put it
peterboynton.com.
up.
Yeah, I've got a website for my music where I don't have everything posted, but I have some stuff there. So
Oh, that's terrific.
yeah.
Um, take us back to the audition for Tonio. What do you remember? Did you have to screen test with somebody?
So this is a wonderful and awkward story. So the backstory on all this is, without naming any names, there was a casting director for As the World Turns for many, many, many years that I couldn't get past. Every time my agent sent me in, you got to get past the casting director before you can get to the producers and eventually the head writer and all of that. And I would go in role after role and never got past the casting director. So that went on for years. And I had friends on the show. I was good friends with Charita Bauer on Guiding Light.
Oh, yeah.
Because we did theater together. And she kept saying, Peter, oh my God, you should be on Guiding Light or As the World Turns. I was like, I know, I'm trying. And this woman cast both of those shows. She was the casting director. So
I know who you're talking about.
Okay,
Betty
so
Ray.
I could not get through
Get
there.
out.
Don't say names.
Betty missed an opportunity. Betty is a legend, but Betty missed an opportunity.
Couldn't get past her. And even Charita was plugging for me. And she would be like,
I mean,
you know what, Betty?
Peter, I have to interrupt you. That is a legend there in and of itself, Charita Bauer. I love that.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome. Mama Bauer. Yeah.
Oh,
she was wonderful. We did a production of Stephen Sondheim's Side by Sondheim, and she was the narrator. Oh my God, she was so funny.
Oh, wow.
She was wonderful. But anyway, so that casting director moved on, and within 6 months I was on the show. Boom. And I came in and I auditioned for one role.
Thank you, Vince Liebhart.
Yes. So I auditioned for one part and tested.
Do you remember who that was?
I don't remember who it was. But on my own. So anyway, I tested but didn't get the part. And I found out much later, this is a cool story. I was touring the year before all this started to happen with a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat all over the East Coast. And my girlfriend at the time, Lori Landry, who was on, what soap was she on? But she did Broadway, and she was my girlfriend. She was touring with a production by the same producing company, but 2 weeks behind us on the tour on a production of Gypsy. And she was playing Gypsy Rose Lee, and Doug Marland was playing Herbie, the character Herbie.
Oh my God.
So my show closed, and I thought my girlfriend, Lori Landry, said, come hang out with us for the last 2 weeks of our tour. And I was like, okay, sure. So I spent so much time hanging out with this guy, Doug, who played Herbie. I had no idea what he did outside of, he was already, he'd been the head writer for the one out in LA with Luke and Laura,
General Hospital,
and so he was kind of like moonlighting doing this summer production, this summer theater tour, because he loved musical theater. So anyway, that's Herbie. That's cool. That's that guy, Doug. He did a great job. So now I test for this first role once I get past the casting director, and I don't get it. But when I go in to test the next time, that was for Tonio. And Casey Childs, who ended up playing one of the doctors on the show, he also tested at the same time. And they liked him a lot, but thought he wasn't quite right for that role. But you see how that works? He then got a role down the road because they saw him. He wasn't quite right for this, but we got to remember that guy. So that's what happened with me. And after I got the part, I got to meet Doug, and I was like, wait a minute, I know you. And he was like, of course. He said, of course you know me, and you did a wonderful job when you tested the first time, and I wrote this part for you. So I was testing, but he said, I wrote this with you in mind.
Oh my God, I love that.
So
Doug
that's how that stuff happens, and you never know. If I hadn't become friendly with him and then had some contact with him later, I would never have known that,
Love that. Tony just told me Laurie was on Another World as Nicole Love. Nicole Love.
Yeah.
When you got the part, were you nervous that first day walking onto a TV set?
I'm sure I was. I was working immediately with Finn, and
somebody just told me today's her birthday, by the way, which I didn't know. Wow. Somebody, yeah.
Well, we had met the first time when I tested, and she was so generous and friendly. She was about to head to Paris, and we had mutual friends, and not mutual friends, but we both have a connection in Paris. And so we just felt very comfortable with each other. So my first day of work was mostly with her. So I really wasn't too worried about it. And you know what, to be honest, I'd done 2 other soaps before that. So I had soap experience, One Life to Live and The Catlins. And so I was totally comfortable with the 3-camera setup and how the process worked and all of that. And I didn't really know in much depth the rest of the cast yet. Like, like Larry Brigman, I think I'd heard the name, and Liz Hubbard, but I didn't really know them. And by saying that, I mean, I didn't know enough to be a
scared.
little
I
intimidated.
gotcha.
And once I got to start working with them, and Liz, sharp as a tack, I mean, she was very demanding. And, Scotty too is one of someone my age-ish, Scott Bryce was also just really, on mark
The
all the
talent
time. There are no
pool.
throwaway scenes. It was a very rigorous, let's do exceptional work atmosphere. And I can remember the first time Liz pulled me aside, and she was usually a woman of fairly few words. And she said, that's really good. That's really good what you did there. And I felt like, okay, I've been accepted. It was a very generous studio, very generous environment. The cast really got along well. It's a soap is kind of like the modern day version, or in a nighttime soap is the same thing, of the old touring companies, where the company's together for decades and they all play different roles at different times. That's different than what we do on the soap, but you really just get to know them, and you get to know everybody, and you get to know your characters so well after you get past 5 years, and it's like, oh my God, I know exactly what my character will do based on what they've given me here in the script. And it's just it's a wonderful way to work. You don't go real deep, but you have a lot of it's not deep emotionally often, or in terms of really drilling down into motivation, but you learn to be very quick in making smart and interesting decisions, as an actor, about what's going to work, what's going to be compelling, what's going to make more tension, or relieve the tension, whatever the situation is. So it's a wonderful way to work. I'm sorry they're not as prevalent today, especially for the theater actors in New York who still, you do a Broadway show, you don't make any money unless you're a big star pulling in, big bucks. So to be able to do a Broadway show and do a soap to pay your bills, was awesome.
It's a shame on so many levels because of every area of the soap, in all departments, that there aren't, for young folks, actors, casting people, hair and make, all of that just gone. Mysterio, a fan said, Peter's acting style is similar to Raul Julia.
Well, he was one of my favorite actors.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I saw him do Three Penny Opera when I first moved to New York, and he blew me away. And then I saw him do the Pinter play with 3 people, Blythe Danner, Raul Julia, and the guy who played Dustin Hoffman's brother in Marathon Man, who gets killed. What's that actor's name? He was involved with, spy stuff or whatever. I can't think of his name. Roy Scheider. Anyway, I forget the name of the Pinter play. I think it's called Betrayal. I think that's the right name. But anyway, I saw Three Penny Opera, and then a little while later I saw Raul Julia in Betrayal, and I'm like, oh my God, the range this guy has, and that wonderful accent. Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's just where he's from, but
speaking of accents, what did Doug or the show say they wanted Tonio to have?
So that's interesting. Yeah. So at the audition itself, before we started, we did a rehearsal, and they said I asked a couple of basic questions, which I learned later. The guy that directed the test was the executive producer at that point, and he said, I asked a few questions, and he said, oh yeah, good point. It could go this way. Okay, take it this way. I was like, okay, good, without being specific. And then I said, accent, and he said, what? I said, this guy's from Montega. He's from Latin America. I don't care if he was educated in London. He's from a Latin country. And he said, well, how do you feel about that? And I said, well, you want to hear my Ricardo Montalban? And he said, okay. I said, rich Corinthian leather. Do you remember that when those car commercials where Ricardo Montalban was the rich Corinthian leather? And he said, okay. He said, okay, do it subtly, like it's someone who has been trained outside of Latin America in terms of schooling, but you don't quite lose, that little bit of the Spanish accent. So that's what I did in the test. And I learned later that I was the only one they let do that. So that's cool. That's how that worked out.
Did you recognize any of the other actors who were up for Tonio? Do you remember any?
Well, Casey Childs, I forget the character he played. He was a doctor. He was with Lila. What's that?
Bill Shanks. Wasn't that
Bill
his name?
Shanks. Oh, was Casey the character name?
He was Casey Peretti, Dr. Casey Peretti.
It's been 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Billy Shanks, he also tested
Tonio,
I think. I'm pretty sure I have that right. I think that's where I met him. And so then, of course, I saw him later. And there were a few people that wandered through the show that I knew from, either they were day players or they had short-term roles or, Maggie Baird is the fun story. You know who Maggie Baird is, right?
The name sounds familiar.
So she's the mother of Billie Eilish.
Oh, yeah.
And she was on the show. I think she was on the show about a year or so. I can't remember how long. But,
and her husband was on Guiding Light as well.
So there you go.
Billie's both parents were on, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. I was talking to Tamara Tooney recently because we've stayed great friends. And
I love that.
We've known each other since way before As the World Turns. And I mentioned that to her. I said, that's really cool. Maggie's kid is killing it. And she's like, Maggie Baird. She's like, what's Maggie Baird's kid doing? I said, that's Billie Eilish. He's like, what?
I know, people really, yeah, exactly. And it's so funny.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, both kids. I mean,
what's really fun to watch? I'm terrible with names. What's the guy? He's really funny. He did Broadway. He has a talk show, but he drives around in the car and sings with celebrities.
James Corden.
Right. Have you seen his session with Billie Eilish?
Oh, I don't think so.
Look it up and watch it. It's really fun because they have a great time in the car, but then she says, well, let's go home. Let's go meet my mom. So they go to the house and they go in and Maggie's there and they talk. And this is the bed where we sat and we, Phineas and I did our first album with our laptop. And it's a really fun episode.
I would love to just get both parents because if they're forget Billy, they're, they both husband and wife, both started on As the World Turns and Guiding Light. It's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
I want to bring up some of the women some of your co-stars. You mentioned Liz, you mentioned how Finn. Talk about working Susan Marie, and I'll just, what comes to mind when you think of just working opposite?
So, the funny thing working with Susan was, how did we meet? We met through Meg. Oh my God!
Actress?
What's her real name?
Lindsay Frost?
No. She played Meg, my wife, on the show.
Oh, Jennifer Ash.
Jennifer, right? Boy, it's been decades. Isn't it terrible?
It's a long time.
There's only a few people like Tamara and Scotty Bryce, and there's only a few people I really have contact with still. But anyway, Jennifer was very good friends with Susan, and she brought her to one of our As the World Turns, I think it was the Christmas party. And I remember walking in, I had a girlfriend at the time, but I remember going to the party and it's like, who's that? There was just something about her that, you just never know how these things happen. And we ended up getting together and dating. And next thing I know, we've been together for a while. And she says, hey, I have an audition for As the World Turns. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. So she auditions, gets the role. And initially it was a short-term role. And Doug loved her. Doug loved her work. And that turned into a contract role. So now, we're a couple and we're both contract players on the show. So we decided to get married, and it was so funny because we came to Vermont up here to do our wedding, and we got married on a Saturday, and we had sort of Sunday off, and Monday we had to be back in the studio at As the World Turns, and our two characters had their first bed scene. So we just got
After
married in
that
real life.
weekend?
We just got married in real life, and in the soap life, on the 2 days later, we had our first bed scene, quote unquote. So that's just all the
Wow.
goofy stuff that,
I had
life.
no idea that you guys, just back then, I knew you were together. I didn't realize you had been together before meeting on World Turns.
Oh yeah, we met through an As the World Turns party through Jennifer, but we
Yeah.
were together before she got the chance to audition for the show. Yeah. Yeah, so
I
that was
mean, you
kind of fun.
both
Say again?
you both had legendary, really, roles that people
Yeah.
still talk about today, both of you.
Yeah.
Those are roles
Yeah, they were
that
fun.
fans just
Well,
loved.
people don't really quite get how good writing makes us look better. Some stuff it's so hard to fix, and make real and whatever. And there was always things we wanted to tweak, and actors are always complaining. The joke, how do you make an actor unhappy? Give them a job, because they always complain, but seriously, our head writing team, writing the Bible, Doug, and then the episodic writers, they were all very good. They were all very good,
Yeah.
and we had good directors. And like I said, the cast was really, Scott was a blast to work with. One of my crazy stories about Scott, I think they were shooting somebody's wedding, and those take forever. So after a while, you get a little punchy. And we had a scene where I'm sitting with Sierra, and I'm probably looking at him like I want to kill him. And he's sitting with his mother or something, Lila, and looking at me like I want to kill him. And so the blocking was, we got up from our respective tables and we walk past each other and look at each other and keep going. That was the scene. So in the dress rehearsal, neither of us talked about this, but in the dress rehearsal, we get back to, we say, we stop, we locked lips and gave a great big kiss. And of course, it broke the tension because, those things, those can be really long, 12-hour days doing the weddings especially. And that was just a really funny moment. But that was sort of my relationship with Scott. We really respected and enjoyed each other. It was really fun. There's a fair amount of goofing around you can do. Larry Bergman was a big goof arounder in a good way, but then, man, he would bring it on the scene, like a laser. So it's good stuff.
And Don Hastings cracked people up once or twice.
Exactly. Yeah, he was kind of like the papa of the whole group. He'd been there for so long, and just a warm, wonderful guy. He gave me a great tip. My first real vacation I ever took in my life was when I was on that show. And I was like, I've never really been able to afford to go someplace really different and interesting. And he loves St. Bart's. And he talked me into going to St. Bart's. And I only went once. That one time I had a 10-day vacation period. But man, what a great place, and what a great tip of a place to go. Because he'd gotten to know me, and he knew I didn't like touristy places. And like St. Bart's is one of those places you don't necessarily find too many Americans, because there's no golf and there's no tennis. It's beaches and restaurants, very European. So anyway.
I love that. And what do you remember about, and I won't pronounce her last name, Karina Ariava? Bianca?
Who? Oh, Bianca. Was that after me?
No, isn't it Bianca? Am I getting it wrong? So forget Melanie Smith as Emily.
Oh, Melanie. Yeah. Oh, she was terrific. She was a lot of energy, great to work with, funny, smart, I wonder what she's doing. Did she you probably have a beat on what she did after As the World Turns.
She did a lot. She did a lot. She's now not doing so much, but she was like Seinfeld, and she did a ton of great stuff.
Oh, I saw
Uh,
her. I saw her Seinfeld episode. You're
yeah,
right. I
she
did
she
see
did a
that.
lot of episodic and stuff. Um, yeah, she worked quite a bit, but I think she hasn't. Colleen Zank.
Oh my God. Wow. Wow. Yeah, Colleen. So here's a story related to Colleen. My father retired, and my mother watched the show religiously, and she would watch it even when I wasn't on. And she said to my father, who never had any interest, and he's like, who cares if he's on a soap? That sounds so silly. And I kept saying to him, look, don't watch it to see me. The beauty of a soap opera is if you watch even just for 1 or 2 days, you're almost, especially an hour soap, you're almost assured of seeing at least one character that you love or hate or reminds you of someone or does something. There's going to be one character at least that you're going to be, wow, what are they going to do tomorrow? And my father was not like a serial watcher of anything, TVs, movies, whatever. So he finally said, okay, well, give me an episode when you're on. And it was actually the one that I'm on, that lion rug or tiger rug in Colleen's pad.
Barbara's pad.
Barbara's pad. And where it's the first time, the clothes come off and we're having an affair. That's happened to be the first time my father ever watched the show. So we talked on the phone, and it was like, I'm expecting him to say what he thought about me. Not one word about me. The whole conversation, everything was about, tell me about Barbara. Tell me about Colleen's, because she has that Natalie Wood beauty. She has
Totally.
that, so that was really funny. He did not watch every day like my mom, and he didn't. Sometimes my mom, if she got busier, she'd say, well, just make sure I know the ones you're in. My father put the request through my mother to me. Please tell me Barbara's dates. I want to watch the show when Barbara's there. I don't care if you're on or not. I want to.
That's fantastic.
It proves the
Bianca
point.
was Lucinda's daughter, the one she adopted from Montega.
Yeah, I had a little bit of work with her. Not a lot, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember her now. Yeah. Short hair.
I don't.
I'm picturing, yeah, she was not maybe just short.
She was short. I don't know
Maybe
if
that was
was
it.
short. Yeah, she was definitely shorter.
Very sweet.
Yeah.
It's funny. I hadn't thought about her. It's funny if you don't really.
Oh my God. And it is, you're not kidding when you say
it is
it
30
is
years since I left the show. And
yeah,
and
time.
I'm not someone who watches like old episodes. I never even watched my episodes after I had done them. Susan, my ex, was much more aware of what, was happening. So,
well, one of the fans said, I'll never forget the brutal fight scene with Rod Landry. What do you remember about working with William Fichtner?
So he's very intense. He's great, and obviously he's gone on to do, big things movie-wise. He's a guy that didn't talk a lot. He was kind of quiet, seemed like he was shy. And then when the scene would start, he was like super intense, but in control. Sometimes, especially in theater, maybe more in TV, you come up against one of those actors who's very, very intense. And if you're doing physical stuff, they do not keep it within a certain bounds. And it can be, okay, come on. It's not real. Okay. But Bill was good. He's just very intense. I remember thinking he was very good on the soap, and the soap did not begin to allow the depth of some of his very deep guy, very strong emotions. And maybe maybe that's pretty obvious as to why he did so well in his film career, great guy, that's so funny. We were all so young.
and Tonio and James Stenbeck were.
Yeah.
Anthony.
Yeah. It's the thing I remember him, believe it or not, the most is that he had a jewelry business on the side. He sold, jewelry. I'm not sure if he designed it too. I think maybe he designed it. I may be remembering that incorrectly.
I didn't realize that. Colleen shared a story when she and I spoke. She said he used to, I think, bounce up and down before like going on set or something. She was,
Just
she
for
was,
nervous energy, you mean? Or
I think it was his way of preparing. Like he was
yeah,
always.
I don't remember that. We didn't have a lot of story together because, if I'm really present, if Tonio was really present, James is off somewhere. And if I was
Yeah.
not as present, James was there, but we did both bounce off Barbara a lot. So that was one part of a triangle sort of there. There were some cool things like, when the first time I left the show and, they were trying to figure out how to wrap up the big thing with me and Duncan, the fact that we went to Puerto Rico for 10 days and shot on location. I mean, nobody does that in the soaps. That was like kind of amazing. And actually, Susan, it's actually Suzanne now. So I'm trying to make sure I say Susan.
Yeah.
No, but it's Suzanne now. She and Tamara both came on that trip, just to be together and hang out. And we figured out, working backwards, that's where my daughter Noni was conceived.
Oh.
So isn't that funny?
Oh, that's great. On an As the World Turns Remote. Perfect.
Yeah, crazy.
I love that.
But just the fact that, that the network would and the sponsors would come up with the money to send us, down to Puerto Rico and do a film style remote, that was pretty unusual for the soaps.
Shannon, Duncan, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Maggie still, I see
She
her
is
on
still.
Facebook a lot. She's working and she's in a series now. She's doing great. Both Scorpios. I remember we found out we were both Scorpios at one point and had a big laugh on that. But she was fun because, she had a chance to bring some comedy into the show. That was kind of a fun attempt with the writing to have, really have some lightness with one or two characters that are, more like a Seinfeld sitcom than a daytime drama soap, So she did a good job at that. Yeah.
When you look back on all your time there, is there a storyline that stands out for you or particular memory?
Well, certainly, the location, as I just mentioned, that certainly stood out just because it was so unusual to shoot that way on a soap. Um, I would have to say a lot of my favorite moments, a big part of them were working with either Liz or Scotty, between working with those two characters and those two actors specifically. I learned a lot working
Kept
with
you on your toes, I'm sure.
Yeah, I also learned just by watching and paying attention to what they were doing. We're always doing that. We're always absorbing within our craft from other people. It doesn't stop just because you get on a show or something. And I remember thinking, sometimes I would be in a scene with Liz or watch a scene or whatever and think, oh, that was really smart. Like just pausing at a certain spot or knowing how to use the camera, that just little things that you learn how to do, if you're paying attention. Some people just do it really naturally. And some people, I'm more of a grinder, I have to listen and learn and think and, oh, okay, that's how that works. I don't necessarily naturally come to some things, but working with those two were really good memories.
I bet. During your time there in Oakdale, you purchased the amazing Skinner Barn in Vermont in 1988. What was your plan when you first purchased that?
Summer theater. So it wasn't called the Skinner Barn when I bought it. It was the.
Isn't this gorgeous? Look at that.
It was falling down. The barn, you see it there nice and straight. Picture it leaning about 25 degrees to the left. The whole barn was literally ready to fall down. You couldn't walk on any of the floors. It was a 10-year renovation. And I had a fair amount of the skills to do it myself and with friends and helpers, because my dad was handy in anything with construction, with wood, with building electronics. My dad was just really a Renaissance man in engineering and construction wise. And I saw the property, and the farmhouse was off its foundation. I mean, I got it for a very, very inexpensive amount. And my plan was, I'm in my late 60s now. My plan was, now I'd be coming up here full time, not when I was 39, which is when I came here full time. And that was a result of, having a life change and being divorced and being the full time caretaker of my daughter. And I just decided, Susan and I had always thought it'd be better to raise, if we could, our child in Vermont. It's fantastic to be raised in the city too. It's just very different. And both of us had more rural upbringings. So,
and this is her.
Yeah, that's way back. That's probably, oh my gosh, she would have been in college still then. So that's probably 12 or 15 years old. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. And, I'm continually still working on this property. My wife, Regina, and I, we always have some new renovation in mind.
And you got married
on
the property 20 years ago, right?
2008. So what?
Oh, okay. So about 15 years ago.
Somewhere in there, 2007, 2008. We got married twice. So it's just for fun. Yeah.
And now you rent it out for weddings.
Yeah, we do. This is our 23rd year doing weddings. And we did theater until COVID. We did theater for 20 years until COVID. We always took the month of July and sometimes August too to do summer theater. And then from mid-May to mid-October during our warm season here in Vermont, we would do weddings. And so I'm still doing the weddings. We have last year, we did 17. This year is going to be a little quieter, but we usually have at least, a dozen or so weddings every year. And that helps, cover renovation costs and property taxes. And
yeah, I'm sure.
A wedding is basically a piece of theater. So, it's a pageant. Who are the players? What's the music? What's the colors? What's the story the couple is telling? It's absolutely a piece of theater. And that's why most people in the wedding site business, like I'm doing, or like a bed and breakfast, they last 4 years. That's the national average. So the reason I'm still doing it 23 years later is, first off, it's only 5 months each year. I don't do it in the winter. And our winter is 7 months of the rest of the year. And the other thing is, to me, it's like I'm helping a couple produce a theater piece. And I love theater. So it's really quite cool.
Wow. I love that description. How did you learn that side of, I know the theater side you've got, but there's a business side to it as well.
So there's another old barn. It's a round barn. Beautiful. You can look it up later. It's called the Inn at the Round Barn Farm. And they're about a mile as the crow flies from my property here. It's another old barn, just different architecture. And they had renovated their space some years before I was done finishing. They did theirs in a year because they could throw $1 million at it back then, which was a lot of money. And me, it took 10 years because it was like, save money, peck away, save money, peck away, But I literally opened the barn just doing cultural events. And then a neighbor said, hey, could my kid get married? And I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So we did that. And then someone else said, hey, could we get married? And I kind of went, maybe I have a business here, So everything that I had to put into the barn for theater, restrooms, ready rooms or dressing rooms, common spaces, the big space, everything you needed for theater was exactly what you needed for weddings. And my site is amazing. You can't tell from the photos, Alan, but I look right at 3 ski areas here, 3 big ski areas out my window. And I have the Von Trapp farm. The Von Trapp dairy farm is my immediate neighbor there. And a beautiful Morgan horse farm is my immediate neighbor on the other side. So I'm on a gravel road. It could not be more quintessential Vermont. So all of that made sense for weddings. Once I started doing it, boom, I hardly even advertise. I just fill up every year.
Wow.
I have a website for it, theskinnerbarn.com,
Yeah,
but I don't do, all the other big advertising avenues that people that do the wedding business do. Partly because I've been doing it for so long, people know I'm here.
absolutely. And they find it. Um, when you were doing theater on the property, were you acting in those productions or producing, directing?
Yes, 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 and yes. So I was always the producer. I was often half the time the director. I was always in the show. My friend Nick Corley, we did She Loves Me together and a bunch of other shows, and he's done 5 or 6 Broadway shows as an actor, and he does a lot of assistant directing for Broadway shows. Nick's one of my oldest friends, and Nick Corley would come up often and direct if I wasn't directing, or it was a big show like The Man of La Mancha, and I'm playing, Quixote. You can't direct and do that big part. It's too much. So Nick would come up and direct a show that I had, kind of a major part in. But it was great. I usually had at least 2 or 3 Broadway professionals in the cast with me, paying, the union scale for a small space. That's why we kept it at 99 seats, because you get above that, it got much more expensive for the actors and stage managers and whatever. And then the rest of the cast was talented locals. For example, there's a gal named Shayna Taub, who is currently co-writing the Broadway adaptation of the film The Devil Wears Prada.
Oh, wow.
The composer is Elton John, and she's writing the book. And she's from this little town and was my theater student, at the local high school, and did Bat Boy the musical with us in our summer theater. And there she is now in New York, killing it. There's an artist, a music artist named Grace Potter, who a lot of people know. She was nominated for a Grammy last year. But Grace Potter and the Nocturnals was a band she was in for a long time. And then she started a new band, opened for the Stones for their whole international tour, a few years back. But same thing, Grace was, involved in all the theater stuff I did at our local high school. I took over directing their musicals for 13 years. Since I was here, and I had the skill, and I thought, let me share it, as well as the Burlington College stuff you mentioned.
Do you have a favorite show you've put on at the Skinner?
La Mancha's right up there. A Little Night Music. Oh my God, what a great show. I would say La Mancha, A Little Night Music, and what's the one where the audience gives you the ending? The Dickens, Unfinished Dickens. Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of it.
I don't know. Somebody,
Quick
Tony might.
conclusions often lead the best of us astray. The wisest thing in life is just to wait. It's a great little song. I'll think of it. Oh, I just pull it up on my thing. But anyway, yeah, I like the bigger book musicals. I really love those. And we did a really quirky one. We did a lot of different things. So
Edwin Drood.
Yeah, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Yeah. Oh my God.
I knew Tony would know.
It's a brilliant show. It really is. And that's one Nick came up and directed. And we had 3 Broadway pros in that one, because some of those roles are really tough. Anyway, good memories.
Do you still perform in?
Such a loaded question, because I've been asked to do, now that people know I'm not producing theater here and busy all summer, I've been asked to do parts in 2 local things, and I've said no, because I really am. Here's the thing, Alan, I'm 5 or 6 hours a day, every day, working on this.
Wow.
And I'm at the point now, I have songs in 6 different music libraries, and they're getting pitched for shows, and I am just whole hog into writing again. I just love it. Part of that is, this will sound weird, but part of it is the theater stuff. You do it and it's gone. I mean, it's gone. You do a Broadway show, maybe 10,000 people saw it. I don't know how to pick a number. A really long running show, much more. But that's tiny. You do a soap. Like when I was doing She Loves Me, one of the guys who was one of the big leads in the show always got pissed off. I would hear about it through other people, that we'd come out the stage door and there'd be people wanting Tonio autographs from me. And I had a much smaller part, but the viewership is so much bigger, and the TV stuff does live on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I like the music. Every time I write a song, I'm trying to write a better song to get to the best song that everyone's going to know and that will last for however long.
I love
And
that.
sometimes you never hit that target, but the beauty is in the process, not the end result. And just to live with a song and be creating it and thinking about it, and I can't sleep because I've got these ideas and I got to get up in the middle of it's wonderful. It really is such a great,
It's a great.
it's more exciting
You could
creating.
hear the passion in your voice. Do you? That's a keyboard behind you.
Yeah.
Do you play other instruments?
I play guitar. There it is.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Acoustic and electric. My first instrument was the accordion.
Really?
When I was like middle school, yeah. And I played the saxophone for a while in high school, but I very quickly came to a really smart conclusion. If you are playing a saxophone, you can't talk or sing. So I've never picked up a wind instrument again, because for me, it's all about talking and singing. I mean, I talk too much, but
I
as
love
my
that.
wife will
Do you
say.
still play? Could you still pick up an accordion and play?
Sure, because there's some really basic stuff you never forget. And I've actually thought of learning. I've always admired the sound of a concertina. Some people call it a squeeze box, the one that's on both sides.
Yeah.
Buttons on both sides instead of keys on one side and buttons on the other. And I've always wanted to do that. And I played fiddle for a while. My daughter Noni wanted to learn, so we did it together for years. And we have a woman who lives locally. I mean, she's an Irish fiddle player, amazing. She toured with Don Henley. I mean, she's that caliber. And so we took fiddle lessons with her for like 5 years, and I picked that up once in a while. But keyboard's the main thing for writing. It's a really great instrument to write on.
And they've come such a long way too on what they can do.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I'm sitting I have this all set up because this is where I write from often. We're doing people who collaborate are doing this by Zoom now, so I know this is a different StreamYard or something, but
Yeah, but same thing.
But it's the same as Zoom. That's why I have a great mic here, because I'm
Mhm.
on it all the time. And I have the new Apple 27-inch monitor. Like, watch. Oh, come on,
Wow.
do it. It has to perform. It hasn't performed. Maybe this is built, something stops it in
Oh,
StreamYard.
it might be.
If I'm in Zoom and I move, the camera, not the monitor, but the camera follows me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's part. You have to have Ventura, which is the latest Apple
Yeah.
OS. But if you have Ventura and you have your camera in your monitor, it follows you. So I could get up and move, and the camera follows me. It's crazy.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Tony says the right hand on the accordion is the same as a piano. Is
It
that?
is. Yeah,
Oh,
just shorter. Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Matthew had sent a question. He says he is once and hopefully a future Vermonter again. He lived in Brattleboro. He'd
Yeah.
love to know what Vermont has taught you. He says for him, it was to stop sweating the small things.
So I think my biggest takeaway about Vermont, and I live in a really small town. The town of Waitsfield has about 3,000 people. I grew up initially in Damariscotta, Maine, which is even smaller. So when I came here, I already knew small town because I was from it. But the thing, like, we just came through a really tough time in the country with COVID. And you could see on the news, all these fights about masks or not masks, or a lot of ungenerous behavior where someone would say, well, why should I discomfort myself, for the sake of everybody else? And even just saying that sounds horrible, but we didn't have that in Vermont. There's something about, if I could flip the camera around, we have a ton of snow right now. People get stuck all the time. People shovel each other out. People help each other. The weather is severe here often. So there's a different mentality about community, especially since there's fewer of us. We're the second least populated state by area after Wyoming, I think. So all of those things contribute to a different mentality a little bit, I think, here. And that's my takeaway about Vermont. You don't, you don't, there's
Kindness
small stuff
prevails.
I get. Yeah, maybe I think it's just more generosity and a little bit more, you know, you do let your neighbor do their thing. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of my nose in your business. There's a lot of individuality here, but because you need community for sort of the general welfare, this all sounds very general the way I'm saying it, but I think you get my point. It's just that
Yeah.
people tend to be less, you know, a dime a dozen. I think people look and see people, like in New York. Here's an easy example. If you live in New York, you cannot stop and help every homeless person you see.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in my town and somebody was lying on the side of the road, everybody's going to stop. You know what I mean? It's part of it is just sheer numbers. You can help take care of your fellow person here more easily than in a really densely populated place. And that's part of why people in rural areas feel more sense of community.
How did fatherhood change your life?
I love being a father. When Susan and I decided we weren't going to be married anymore, there was never any question that I would be raising our daughter. I just loved doing it. And I was a natural dad. And I talked to my daughter every other day. We're very close, and
she's in the Big Apple.
she's in the Big Apple. The big changes for me was I had to make a decision. I'd say, okay, I was just coming off a Broadway show. I'd been doing the soaps, I had nothing but more ahead of me. And it was also true, if I had stayed in Manhattan, my daughter would have been raised by other people that I hired, especially if I was doing an 8-show week in a Broadway show. I never would have seen her, So I already had this place up here, and I thought, well, make the change now. So when I came up here, Alan, I did not have a way to make a living.
Wow.
I had to, in my first years here, I had 4 or 5 different jobs to make ends meet. And then I developed my own businesses, and everything worked out great. And I was never, I did worry, can I keep my property and that kind of thing? Those are the realities of trying to make a dime in the middle of nowhere, So those were different challenges, but I actually enjoy challenges, and I actually enjoyed being put to the test. Can I do this? Yeah, I can do this. I've always if someone says, you can't do this, Peter, I'm going to go out of my way to do it, So that's part of the challenges of having been a father up here, and, make sure my daughter's raised well. And, you always fear as a parent, am I doing the right thing? When you're doing it much of the time as a single parent, you're like, really, I hope my daughter's not up in a bell tower with an M16. This is because of dad. That's the kind of worry all parents have, whether they admit it or not.
Even though she's in the Big Apple, does she revere Vermont?
Oh, she loves Vermont. She loves the country, and she loves the woods. She's more of an in the woods person, where I'm a more of out in the open person. She just loves the woods and the overhang and deep forest and all that. So she loves Vermont. And it's also true that she's an artist and she's a performer, and you're not going to do that in Vermont and make a living. You're going to do something else and try to keep up your art. I'm at the stage now where I get 2 pensions from my acting unions. I get Social Security, I have income. I still have a business in the barn, so I have income there. So I now have the luxury of writing music all day.
Something you love.
I
Doing what you
couldn't,
love. That's a
I
testament
didn't
right
do it at
there.
all for 25 years. And that was part of because I decided I'm up here raising my daughter, trying to make a living. You need peace and quiet and time to write or create. Some people can do it no matter what. Apparently I needed to get back to this back end of my life arc, where it's a little quieter.
Well, you worked your butt off to get to this place where now you get to do what really brings you, what I can see, and I think the fans can see, much joy.
Yeah. The only thing I'll contest on how you said that, if anybody thinks being on a soap is work, they're crazy. So yes, the hours are long. Yes, you have to memorize the line. Yes, you have to bring your skills. Yes, you have to be a professional and focused. Is that work? It wasn't for me. I didn't really ever work until I was up here holding down 5 jobs to make my property go. Like most people are trying to make ends meet, and they're not necessarily doing something they absolutely love. So that's where I'm lucky, you know. So worked my butt off and enjoyed every moment, as opposed to work my butt off and, oh, thank God I'm in a better place now. It's not that, for me.
Well said, and a perfect way to end. And there's a ton of love from people who are watching from Vermont
Oh, that's
today.
great.
So,
Awesome.
so, Peter, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. Really
Yeah,
great to meet you.
it was so fun to think about those years again, because I don't often think about them. So it was really fun to think about it. That's awesome. It's awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad. You stay well, and hopefully, if I get up to Vermont, I'll come calling. I'd love to see
You
that
make
place.
sure you let me know.
I
Yeah.
will. You have a great afternoon.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Peter Boynton, for stopping by. If you want to look up, visit theskinnerbarn.com or peterboynton.com to listen to some of his music. I need to say a big thank you to one of the Locker Room fans, Ben Orturi, for the sweet gift he sent today from Spoonful of Comfort, because I am sick. I just had a cup of wonderful tea with lemon and honey. Thanks to you, Ben. Please join me next Wednesday when Emmy Award-winning writer Dave Ruppel joins me live, and Thursday, actor Walt Willey from All My Children. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And if you liked today's show, which I hope you did, click the like button. And remember, you can stream The Locker Room on your favorite streaming platform. Just search The Locker Room and download today. Have a great afternoon, everybody.